So I gave myself a Mickey Mouse Band-Aid. Oh, right there. I just poked myself. So we're doing this. Video. Got distracted.
If you Google the Young Turks, the result you are going to get are mainly these clowns. A group of American left-wing pundits who named their show after the Young Turks. Why you would do that, I don't know. The result, however, is that this is what people think the Young Turks are, when the Young Turks were in fact someone else. It all started in the 1800s. After several military defeats, the Ottomans invited foreign military staff to train their military officers in newly built cadet schools in places like Thessaloniki. A generation of young Turkish officer cadets, as well as a generation of Turkish students of law and medicine, had the opportunity to travel abroad and study the newest insights in technology, military leadership, and laws abroad. And it convinced them that something had to radically change if the empire was to be saved. They formed underground organizations such as the Committee for Union and Progress, but they became more commonly known as the Young Turks. These revolutionaries believed that for the Ottoman Empire to survive, it needed to reform and adapt to a new world where it would take its equal place amongst European empires. At the turn of the century, the Ottoman Empire fell into another period of crisis. The Austrians occupied Bosnia, and dozens of rebellions flared up by Greeks, Armenians, Albanians, Macedonians, and Arabs. Within all this mess, the Young Turks seized the opportunity to seize power in 1908. The Sultan was forced into signing away all political power and reinstate a constitution. The Ottoman Empire became a constitutional monarchy, but in no way became a democratic society. But their ascent to power did not slow down the decline. Instead, it encouraged outsiders to take advantage of the instability. An Albanian uprising, a war with the new Balkan states, and a war with Italy were the result. The Ottomans lost their last lands in the Balkans, as well as Libya and strategically important Aegean islands to the Italians. And the uprising in Albania foreshadowed what was to come in the following decade. After crushing the rebellion, the Young Turk government banned the Albanian language, Albanian alphabet, Albanian schools, and Albanian traditional dress. By 1913, power resided with a military triumvirate under the three Young Turk pashas or military leaders, Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, and Jamal Pasha. And with that, they also increasingly abandoned the idea that an empire of multiple ethnicities and faiths could successfully be preserved. Turkification was instead what they worked towards. As the Young Turks started to build a modern nation-state out of their empire, they sought new ideas and fictions around which to forge their new vision. The old ways, the ways of the religious hierarchy and Sharia, had to go. But what do we replace it with? The Young Turks adopted a nationalism through which they saw peoples in ethnic and lingual categories and classifications. They started using the word Turk when describing themselves and the land most Turks lived in. While the Ottoman nobility may have spoken Persian, the Young Turks popularized the use of the Turkish language as a rebellion against the corrupt royal elites. This was an era of nationalist movements across the world, trying to reaffirm and reassess cultural independence and identity. In Ireland, Gaelic cultural organizations formed, and playwrights wrote pieces like Kathleen Houlihan, which had the distinct purpose of separating Irishness from Britishness and rediscovering and reinventing an Irish cultural identity. In China, nationalists overthrew the Manchu monarchy and reinvented a new Han Chinese republican national identity. The Indian National Congress increasingly protested the British presence in India, and what happened in the Ottoman Empire was no different than the child of its time. The Young Turks searched for national figures and heroes to reinvent a Turkish culture. The word Turk comes from a tribal name of the old Turkic era and means strength. They rediscovered a medieval Turkish poet and religious mystic, Yunus Emre, who broke with the standards and customs of his time by refusing to write poetry in Persian and refusing to preach religion in Arabic, instead doing so in the common Turkish language of the peasants. He was declared to be the father of the Turkish language, which, however, isn't really true. He just wrote in Turkish to reach more people. Young Turk leaders and politicians such as Ziya Gökalp defined the new Ottoman Empire as a society consisting of people who speak the same language, have the same education, and are united in their religious and aesthetic ideals. And the problem with that increasingly spreading nationalism was that it left no room for others. Your ethnicity, your language, your faith, and the way you practiced your faith became increasingly relevant in this society. The Young Turks became increasingly racist over time, looking down on Arabs, Armenians, Greeks, Assyrians, and Alawites with increasing racialized contempt, as a people who supposedly refused to become part of the modern world or as a foreign and enemy entity from within. With passing time, they became increasingly volatile and also delusional. Enver Pasha dreamt of a great Turkic empire stretching from the Balkans to China that he would conquer for a unified, ethnically Turkish empire. The idea in itself is nonsensical. The Turkic cultural sphere contains various different languages and cultural expressions. Even the notion of a Turkish race, after centuries of assimilations and integrations of different peoples, is purely nonsensical. Yet those facts did not delude the delusions of grandeur that some within the Young Turk ranks had come to believe. A Turkish empire was to be built, and those within it who were not Turks would have to assimilate into becoming Turks or go. The Young Turks aligned themselves with the German Empire, dressed like German officers and generals, and saw the German Empire as an exemplar model for how to build their new empire. As such, they helped drag the empire into the First World War, which first and foremost exposed one thing: their incompetence. Jamal Pasha marched south, intent to take Egypt from the British, lost, got bogged down, and took out his frustrations by mass hangings of Arabs and Assyrians, which resulted in the Arabs increasingly despising their Turkish overlords. Enver Pasha had the genius idea of invading Russia without preparing for the Russian winter, with predictable results. He came back and instead of taking responsibility, blamed the Armenians.
Oh, the genocide. The 8 stages of genocide? I didn't realize there was...
Within the new nationalist vision for the Ottoman Empire the Young Turks had, the Armenians were by not being Turkish and by not being Muslims already separated from the remaining population as different. To emphasize the difference, even though claiming to abandon the old hierarchy of the Ottoman Empire, the Young Turks took advantage of it by branding the Armenians as kuffar, or unbelievers, as beneath the Muslim population. The Armenians never rose above the status of being second-class citizens, even as the Ottoman Empire reformed. After the failed rebellions of the late 1800s, even the Young Turks denied them legal rights and equality with the remaining population. As the Ottoman Empire was at war and had suffered significant military defeats, the Armenians were an easy pick as scapegoats for all that had gone wrong. In response to a rebellion in Van that had been artificially aggravated by the Ottoman army, the Interior Minister of War made the decision to mass deport the Armenians. Enver Pasha, on May 2, 1915, gave his seal of approval to this via letter. The Young Turks sought to remove the Armenians for nationalist reasons, on the grounds of removing an ethnicity from their society. But to achieve this, they went by a different means, appealing to the Islamic beliefs of the majority population. They called for a jihad against the non-believers and appealed to people to rid the empire of the kuffar. Lists were made of Armenian intellectuals and community leaders, camps established, soldiers were given orders, militias were armed, and camps built for the purpose.
Now, the Turkish government, don't they deny that this ever happened? In terms of, I guess, it being a genocide, but I believe they denied that it ever happened.
The order was given, Armenian community leaders and intellectuals in urban...
Which I just want to say is not exactly unbelievable. If you're involved in a genocide, you're probably not going to say, yeah, we totally did that. And they deserved it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to come out and say that. Over time, you're going to be like, no, wasn't us. That was the Portuguese. It wasn't us.
Areas were arrested and killed. Armenians were forced to leave their towns and deported south into the Syrian desert in forced marches. Up to 1.5 million Armenians died in the deserts of Syria, forced to march through the deserts or left in camps with neither food or water. They succumbed to thirst, hunger, and disease. Every genocide has its deniers. However, the traces of what happened cannot simply be wiped away. Travel through eastern Anatolia today and you will see the empty Armenian churches wherever you may go. The Armenian genocide is denied by the Turkish government and Turkish academia to this very day. And the society that cannot confront the demons of its past is a society that will be haunted by those demons. As such, we will encounter this genocide again in later chapters.
I just want to say, I think that's the brilliant thing about what Germany did with Hitler. They immediately jumped on it and they were like, look, I don't want to spoil this for anybody, but Hitler, probably not a good person. It's debatable, I guess. I'm joking. So, I mean, they're right on it and they teach everything, all the evil. And I think that is probably the best way to approach it. Just right on, just head-on collision with it, deal with it, get it out of the way. It's part of the history. It's something that we haven't done here with the Native Americans, slavery. It's something that we still avoid. And when we do teach it, we teach it, but we don't. I don't think we show the gravity of it. We're more interested in telling you about the Holocaust. Look what they did. They're terrible for doing that. You know what I mean?
The genocide in the end didn't help the Young Turks change the tide of war. As the Russian Empire collapsed, the Armenians in the east broke off to form their own republic, now even more hostile towards them. The Arabs rebelled en masse and harassed the Ottomans from Arabia to Damascus, something the British would take advantage of. And the British Expeditionary Force took Basra and Baghdad. In the end, the Young Turks only signed their own death warrant with what they had done. The world had noticed what had happened, and for what they had done they would, in case of defeat, not be able to merely surrender, but would be wanted men for the crimes that they had committed.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep going. Cometh the hour, cometh the man.
Our story, the story of modern Turkey, begins here on the beach in the Dardanelles, in a place called Gallipoli. And to fully understand and appreciate, we need to go back to be introduced to the man who would make and shape modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. He was born as...
Was that a cemetery? Sorry.
Mustafa in 1881 in Salonika, which is today's Thessaloniki in modern-day Greece. It might seem weird to you, but in the Ottoman Empire, commoners did not have last names, only the royal family did. Growing up in Ottoman Greece as a Turk would impact his views in later life. The experience of being part of a minority in a majority culture, but also in that he was exposed to the nationalism and ideas of the Greeks around him at the time. Not just if Greece should be an independent state or not, but whether it should be a Hellenic kingdom or a Hellenic republic. In school he would excel at maths and prove to be a very intelligent kid, resulting in his teacher giving him his second name, Kemal, from the Arabic word for excellence. After school he would enroll in an Ottoman military academy in northern Macedonia and later in the Ottoman Military Staff College in Istanbul, pursuing a career as an army officer. It was through his path through the military institutions of the empire that he met and joined the various revolutionary movements around the Young Turks. He himself also got the chance to travel abroad and also formed revolutionary organizations such as in Damascus, with the intention of reforming the empire. He was in many ways a rebel. He smoked a lot and even drank a lot of alcohol, which was highly forbidden in the empire. He read illegal literature, discussed with his comrades how the empire should be reformed, and at one point even landed in jail for his activities. But there were big differences between him and the other mostly Young Turk officers. Most importantly, he was not a Young Turk. Neither did he believe in their ideas and plans. The Young Turks mainly looked for their inspiration on how to reform the empire to the German Empire and to German nationalism as something to copy. The strict militaristic state hierarchy of what was basically a military dictatorship was in their opinion the only way to save the Ottoman Empire. Mustafa Kemal, however, disagreed. He was more interested in what he had seen in France, in particular the French Republic. He saw the pluralistic political system of the French Republic and its desire for progress and advancement in society and the sciences as a better model to copy. He learned to read and speak French, and as such, while the Young Turks read the translations of Prussian militarists, Mustafa Kemal preferred reading the works of French revolutionary and Enlightenment philosophers. In particular, his favorite one, Auguste Comte, a positivist who strictly rejected all forms of metaphysical thought, advocated for the advancement of society in thinking and actions reasoned and based on scientific facts and research, and in particular, advocated for mankind to liberate itself by abandoning all forms of religious ballast and superstition. Generally, in the history of the last 200 years, Comte's writing had more of an impact than most are even aware of. They are basically the foundation of modern French secularism known as laïcité, and you will find one of his quotes about achieving order and progress, at least partially, on the flag of the Brazilian Republic, whose founders were readers and admirers of Comte. But most significant for our story, they shaped the political thinking of the young officer cadet Mustafa Kemal. He believed the Young Turks didn't go far enough, that they still clung on to old and outdated traditions, that their thinking was still by and large backward, that the German Empire they modeled themselves after was also backward, and that only radical social and state reforms modeled after European republics such as France would be the solution. You might have even heard or read some of his quotes from this era.
There is only one civilization, the European civilization. There is no second civilization. Civilization is the European civilization. And it must be established here, with all of its thorns and roses.
And there was a second,
I've never heard either of those.
large point of disagreement between Mustafa Kemal and the Young Turks. And that disagreement was probably the biggest one with which Mustafa Kemal was also largely ahead of his time. He didn't believe that the empire should continue. He believed that the age of empires and colonialism was coming to an end. He also rejected ideas like Enver Pasha's Turanism, the idea of a pan-Turkish empire stretching from China to the Balkans, as fantasies and delusions. Instead, he advocated for a small Turkish solution. The empire should disband, and it should give up rule over the Arabs and the peoples of the Balkans. He also believed that empire held nations back, that for the Ottomans being tied into the Islamic world, in particular the Arab world, tied the Turks into religious-based political and social backwardness. Therefore, Turkey should give up the idea of being the leaders of the Islamic world, reject all cultural influences from there, draw borders around the smaller, more compact, and mostly ethnically and lingually unison Turkish homeland, instead of seeking deeper ties into Arabia and Iran, and to build new bridges into Europe and North America and rebuild itself as a modern Turkish nation-state. By the time of the Young Turk coup, Mustafa Kemal had risen to the rank of colonel, and by the entry of the First World War was one of the most experienced military leaders of the Ottoman army, with combat experience in the war with Italy and the Second Balkan War. But because of his beliefs, he was kept away from any political power or even any significant military post. His relationship with the Young Turk government was strenuous at best, but eventually he was given a post commanding a division in Gallipoli, and it was there where he proved his worth. Unlike many of his Young Turk contemporaries, he didn't just dress like a soldier, but actually was one. He had a better understanding of modern warfare and the defensive tactics of trench warfare. When the British sent an army of Australian and New Zealand troops to take the Dardanelles and Istanbul with the intention of knocking the Ottomans out of the war, he correctly anticipated where the attacks would take place, to then organize and command a successful defense and what would be the first Ottoman victory of the war. The victory at Gallipoli changed his prospects, as the German allies, but also the Young Turks, had to recognize his potential. But far more important for later years, the fact that he was fighting in Gallipoli kept him clear of any involvement in the Armenian genocide that was taking place at the same time. He was promoted to general in 1916 and given command of part of the army in the Caucasus, where the Russians had recently launched an invasion of Anatolia. Under his command, the Russians were defeated at Bitlis, halting any further Russian advances. This victory made it abundantly clear that Gallipoli had not been a fluke, and that he was one of the most competent commanders in the Ottoman army, for which by 1917 he was put in charge of Ottoman forces in the Levant facing the British and the Arab revolt. But then
I think I'm gonna call it here. I know it went a little bit longer, but we're just gonna call it there. Remember, we're talking about General Mustafa. Mustafa? What did I call him? Mustafa? Okay. I'm going to end this here. And I got to check on my little cut. My little cutty. Okay. We're going to end this here. Like and subscribe. Or I'll release all these videos out of order. I won't do that. Goodbye.